Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Coach and Benway podcast. I am a co-host of this podcast, Dr. Benway. Coach Red Pill is going to talk about something, maybe at my insistence, but I'm sure he's interested. Coach, what is it?
We're going to talk about the bourgeois and how we should revolutionize, overthrow them, kill them, put their heads on spikes, and take over. And viva la revolución, mierda! Well, we were talking about, just before we started this podcast, the recording of this podcast, Benway and I were talking about the upper middle class and how we both pretty much agree that we find the upper middle class despicable. We just don't like them. And I guess what we're talking about is the top 20% of the population of the socioeconomic ladder. We just don't like them. And we both either grew up in that environment or have acceded to that environment for various reasons, basically making money. And we just don't like them. And Benway and I Benway started ranting about this. And I was like, man, that would make a good episode. So here we are. We're going to be talking about this because it's really interesting. I mean, Benway, really, like, you don't like the bourgeois upper middle class that you currently belong to. Why? What is it about them that you so despise? Because I do too, by the way. I'm not mocking you. But I'm kind of curious because it's interesting to know how a fellow hater of something hates them and why, you know. Because maybe I can have different reasons to hate them that'll be complementary. And that'll make your hatred more full.
So I can be more robust in
your hatred.
More robust in my understanding that, in past events of our world history, I understand why people would want to hoist the black flag and begin slitting throats. Yeah, I understand that. It's funny you had mentioned like the top 20%. Even that feels too generous. I'm like the top 5% kind of thing is usually like kind of where I would say it draws the line in terms of annual income. Mm-hmm. It was funny. I had mentioned a story to you how, and this is a trivial matter, but it like teed up thinking along those lines and realizations about how this group acted. This was when I was in college, and I went to the University of Chicago. During that period, there was like one of the humanities classes that you had to take, or the social sciences classes. I'm sure it was something with a stupid name like self-culture and society, or some god awful thing. You had to watch a movie. I think it was Vertigo, and I had a copy just in and of myself because I enjoyed the movie. And so everybody, so one of my roommates, I think, or suite mates, depending on the situation, said, "Oh, I have to watch this movie for class and write something on it. Do you happen to have it I can borrow?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do. Here you go." And it eventually, is under the expectation, obviously, it would return it back to me. And weeks went by. I'm like, okay, there's no way he needs this much time to do it. So I asked about it. It's like, I was just wondering when you were going to return the movie. He's like, "Oh, I had loaned it to this other person." I'm like, "What?" And what the fuck gave you the implication that you could do that? And apparently it had then got passed to like 3 or 4 other people before they had been finished with it. And it got back to me, and I'm like, this is just fundamentally asinine. Why did you think you would do this? And I realized that, well, part of it is because it was an upper middle class or frankly just upper class attitude, which was like, all of this is disposable. It's like we can do with it whatever we want. It's all consumable at the end of the day. Oh, you could just buy another one. Like, you buy me another one, motherfucker. There was no object or interest in preservance or kind of social mores in general. There was only what I need and how I can get it. And, I've already made the decision for you that you shouldn't be worried about it. That attitude persists in this class. And it's above and beyond just sharing shit amongst each other. It's their attitude about making money. It's their attitude about work relationships with other people. It's their attitude.
Well, tell me about that. I'm interested in your point of view on this one. I mean, what about their attitude towards making money, for example?
Well, the attitude to making money is that they are the managerial class. They're there to give people the assurance that, we've already we know the best way to run this, that, or the other. We're professionals. Mind you, we're professionally trained. We even have certification in our master's degrees and what have you. So what does that ultimately entail for business? Like, well, I'll keep some gears moving and take a lot of money for doing it. And, you'll pay me well because, I know what I'm doing. I went to a good school. I've already made the decision for you that this is the right thing. That's what I mean by making money. It's like the extraction of rents from the actual productive element of the businesses they're involved with.
Yeah, so you're basically saying that this class, let's call it the top 10%. Let's split the difference. You say top 5, I say top 20, top 10. Fine. This top 10%, they are basically parasitic. That's what you're basically saying. They give the illusion that things are going well, that somebody is on top of it, quote unquote, but they're just parasitic. They're not actually producing. Is that your basic? Because it sounds awfully Marxist on the one hand, but on the other, I kind of agree with the point you're trying to make. But is that an accurate assessment of your position?
So I would say in many instances, yes, they would be parasitic. I don't think it's universally true. I think there are some folks who do wind up being productive, but they soon, when they do that, discover that they're no longer in the upper middle class. They become part of the upper class, especially if they're successful. I wouldn't say it's entirely Marxist. The Marx would refer to them as the managerial class for sure. He wouldn't necessarily call them parasitic or necessarily bourgeois. The bourgeois would be the capitalists in his mind, those who actually owned the means of production, owned the capital, and made those decisions. We would be like middle management kind of thing, the order takers, and frankly it would be something even more embarrassing because we don't actually
lackeys of the capitalists.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, to tell you the truth, I mean, if I were a Marxist, I would respect the capitalists more because they're actually doing something, as opposed to these lackeys that just are basically around their suck-ups, basically. And they're a big chunk of the population. And they don't actually produce anything.
So it's funny because the smarter Marxists I've encountered in my days do recognize that and do admit it. In fact, one of my the Marxists group that I liked and would listen to referred to, the one intellectual guy in there loved James Bond. I'm like, why did you love James Bond? He's like, he's the last of the great bourgeois morality. I was joking about that. What do you mean by that? It's like, well, the attitude of the self-made man who likes, good things and high quality products and is going to operate under, notions of whatever kind of goodwill that he needs to do and for his people or what have you. And they said Donald Trump also is like that as well. He's the true bourgeois president. He's the actual man of the society, not the bureaucratic class who exists purely to manage the system, but a guy who actually produced something, going in and starting to run things. Now, obviously, their solution is always like a true Marxist would need to ultimately run things in order to best produce something for the society. But a true bourgeoisie is much better than a manager to come in and run the society. Absolutely. So that's absolutely what you've mentioned. Like Marxists should respect the capitalists more. Yeah, they do. The smart ones do.
Yeah, because this managerial class, you're calling them managerial class, but it's more like the illusion of management. Well, they're sort of like upscale, upscale janitors, basically. Wouldn't that be an accurate assessment? They're there to clean up for the people who actually do shit that matters.
Well, there's certainly that, and there's also we exist in the realm of the overburdening of decisions for an actual leader or a capitalist owner or what have you. By that I say this: eventually, if your business becomes big, let's say you're Mark Zuckerberg, and when you're smaller, Mark Zuckerberg, sorry, and you're starting with Facebook, it's small enough to where you can actually keep your eye on everything. You can keep it the way you want. Eventually, you get to an organization so big that even if you could keep your eye on all the decisions, you begin to worry about am I making the right decision? Am I doing it for the best interest of the company? I've got other people breathing down my neck. I need other people to help me at least have the illusion that, decisions have been made that are rational and whatnot. That's where the managerial class comes in and say, hey, you can trust us. We'll run it for you. And you alleviate the burden of the day-to-day running of a business by that. So when I say it's an illusion of management, there's a certain degree where that is true, but there's a certain degree where it's actually real. And it's a byproduct of the real guy in charge is so busy that I'm actually going to take real power from him because he can't handle the decision. This is how I think SJWs get in
Yeah.
to positions sort of like this because they recognize that there's decisions that the executive can't deal with. He just wants to make money. He's like, oh, you handle it, kind of
Yeah.
thing. I can't be bothered.
Yeah, exactly. I also agree that the SJWs are a part of this parasitic class. And I think that that's part of the reason that we despise them so, because we people on our side of the political divide recognize that SJWs don't do anything for society. They just cause problems. And I think that that's a key a key thing about them that drives me at least a little bit nuts. I mean, because what do
Well,
they
the other
do?
thing that well, the other thing that drives me nuts, and it's related to the SJWs, it's you have this paradox of, from what I consider, the most amoral people who are making the most moral pronunciations on everyone. By that I mean, if you really look at this class, like I said, what motivates us? It's like, oh, we're there to, we're tasked with a job of expertise. We're going to do that to the best of our abilities and make money. We'll be resentful of the true guys who run everything. They're never as smart as us. You'll treat all of your relationships as transactional. Your marriage is a fucking partnership, all of that kind of jazz. Yet fundamentally, they'll go around. They're the quickest people to have snap moral judgments on, like,
Yeah.
oh, you're not thinking the right way. You're not adopting the right politics. You're not socially acceptable. Like, I remember, even like when I was, even earlier this week, I was at a sort of like firm cocktail party for an employee,
Mm-hmm.
and while I was there, we were having a discussion of, I think it was one of the real estate developers in Chicago, and she was talking about how he was at some sort of conference. I forget where, but she made a point of saying there were a lot of women at this conference, and he used the word that was like a euphemism for those hats that people were wearing to protest Trump. And he used it in front of these women, and it was so disgusting. And everybody wanted to cancel his appearance in front of everyone. I'm like, oh, so you're saying he said pussy in front of women? You know,
Yeah. And
that
you
kind of
said in
thing.
front of her, and what did she say?
Yeah, I said it behind her back,
Ah,
as I'm smart enough to know when not to get into that. But I'm like, I basically say, yeah, I know the word you're meaning.
yeah.
Let's not play around here.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
it's so
that
blue
snap
stocking,
attitude.
so
Yeah,
blue stocking,
exactly.
and so bourgeois. I've always found bourgeois morality kind of absurd because it's all about appearances and not actual, uh, uh, not true actions. It's the appearance of stuff. Oh, like he used the word pussy in front of me, like, or I used that word that we shall not name of a female genital organ. It's just kind of stupid. We're all grown ups. We all know what it's about. Just say it. You know.
They're so obsessed with propriety, and this is why, like, and the right wing thinkers got this, and for a long time they've gotten this, which is, I love listening to the aristocratic class, or the capitalist owning class, and I love the working class, because the working class has nothing to lose, and the ownership class has nothing to worry about. So they'll say whatever the fuck they want to say, and I am much more comfortable in that environment. Those are the crowds that don't really get offended,
Right.
per se.
Yeah. Or more to the point, they look at things as they actually are, because a lot of times this shield of offense shields you from actually perceiving reality as it is, because you're so concerned about the notion of offense that you don't speak of things directly and objectively. Of I you know m- I came to this conclusion in a very oblique and weird way. Um, Years ago, I was on a project and we had to hire a advertising firm. And I realized that these advertising people were fucking a waste of fucking space. And they were drawing salaries and all the rest of it, and they weren't doing fucking shit. Because at the end of the day, all that mattered was that the company that I was working on, we had to go and buy advertising. And these fuckers were supposed to create an advertising campaign, but in the end, they produced stuff that was just not subpar, and that was rather subpar. And so in the end, it was like our own department came up with the shit, and fine, our own art department, and we had the art and everything, and at the end of the day, they were just brokers, okay. And at the
Yep.
end, and then I'm thinking to myself, what the fuck did we hire these cocksuckers for? We spent a ton of money on these fuckers, and in the end, what? They got a piece of the advertising budget and they got their fee, but what did they provide for us? They sort of like held our hand, but didn't really do anything. And I
Yeah.
thought to myself, what is this bullshit? And then I mean, no offense. I know that you work in consulting, but the same thing happened with consulting. A lot of times I was like, what the fuck do we need a consultant for? We know what the problem is. We just have to need the balls to confront the problem, fire the right fucking people, change course, and that's that. We don't need to hire somebody to tell us what we already know. But then I started realizing, of course, that part of it is the hand holding. That's what they're doing. They're giving the illusion of competence so that you can make decisions that might be potentially difficult or potentially risky, just so that you can cover your ass. And it seemed just very depressing because I thought to myself, I had the opportunity. It was never really seriously considered, but I had the opportunity to work in a consulting firm, and out of college, and I never really, because I didn't know what the fuck a consultant did. It just seemed sketchy, and I just went off and did my own shit, right? But now I think to myself, how difficult is it sometimes to be in that position of basically hand-holding people to jump off the bridge, to do the decisions that they know is the necessary one. I mean, shit, it must be awfully hard for you to be working at this gig.
So there's a few reasons why people bring us in. One, absolutely the hand holding. Related to the hand holding is they know the decision, but they want a third party to just say, "Yep, you're right. That is the right decision."
Do
Other
you ever
times,
contradict him?
yeah, and sometimes we do.
Okay.
It's rare, admittedly, but there's ways we do it that's gentle coaxing as opposed to flat out "you're wrong," and we would never say you're wrong.
Right.
We try to lead the horse to water often more so than cause incident. So there's that. Sometimes we're also brought in when we know there's tension between two groups that have different opinions, and we're brought in to be some sort of like an arbiter.
Right.
And that's fun. Let me tell you.
Sure. Yeah, fun like needles under your fingernails, I bet, right?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, oftentimes it's there's that element of just like give me the gloss that like whatever I'm doing is okay, and people need that whatever. There's also this idea that because it's such a fucking introverted, insulated class in many ways. We know everybody. I can tell you my friend who's in this department, he can say this is what he does. That's a lot of times what consulting does. Like, hey, we need to know what's the best way of doing this. Like, what do you know? It's like, well, Bob so and so from this company does it this way, and he's had this success, and Mitchell Burgerberger from this side of the other side of the world does it this way, and he's had this success. People just love getting that information. It sometimes feels like we're delivering gossip, but whatever.
Yeah, highfalutin gossips, paid gossips. That's a pretty good gig if you think about it.
But yeah, and so that's kind of how we operate. And like I said, especially when you get to a certain level, like in corporations, the people we work with, or frankly, people the level below we work with, you wonder to themselves like, okay, you're in the leadership positions, but what do you do? And the funny thing is, I'll tell you this right now, and I can tell you so many corporate people who just frankly back me up. They are professional meeting goers. You say, what is a professional meeting goer? It's like, well, literally, if you go to their schedule, they're fully booked, if sometimes not double booked or triple booked. I've seen that happen, where all they do is they're nominally in charge of running things, but all they do is go from meeting to meeting to meeting, where they talk about things, they pontificate for a while, and then they get back to their desk like, oh, it's time to go home already. You say to yourself, like, do you ever get anything done? And people will admittedly say, well, no, I don't, because I've been in meetings all day. And it's understood that they would be. And these people run teams, and these people make decisions. And when it comes time to have them, make presentations or make decisions, they frankly don't have time to do that. So funny enough, consultants come in to do their work for them. Jesus. That's one time we actually do real work. It's happened. I mean, I can tell it's not as if I'm like being completely fake here. I mean, the analysis I'm doing is shit that people should be doing, but oftentimes can't do, won't do, don't have the time to do. But it's like basic stuff they should be doing. It's other members of my class who don't have the time to do it, and they just love going to meetings. It's just the standard operating procedure of the class.
Yeah, but it also could be that they go to meetings as a way to avoid decision making so that they don't have the responsibility. And then they decide, hey, we need the consultant to make the decision for us.
That happens a lot. In fact, there's often there's the committee culture, or like
Yeah.
we're consensus driven culture. That's just a way of saying, we go to a lot of meetings and don't do anything differently.
And
This is
nobody has responsibility for any fuck up that happens.
Oh, I've seen companies happen or where they do that, where it's like all discussions, if something goes wrong, or frankly it's like, hey, we need to get ready. Let's say it's a software company. Hey, we need to get ready for the new release for this product, and everybody will say, oh, we can't possibly do it on this time scale. It's like, well, why? Because this department doesn't give me this information that I need, or this department doesn't have all the last information. Their response is like, do you really need me to give you 30 pages to say, like, have a marketing campaign that says 5 things which you knew that we're going to say no matter what? Do you really need to know whether the button is going to be green or blue? Really? You have to do that? And that's common. That's really common. And frankly, a lot of my work is trying to tell people that don't fucking do that.
Well, then how the fuck does a company actually get anything done if it is flooded with this kind of culture?
Last minute decisions and emergency creates necessity is the mother of all inventions, and generally it's the lower ranking and file who are just like producing shit right after each other, whenever it's needed, and then in the last 5 minutes people say, oh, we're doing it this way, and that's how it happens.
So why don't we just fire this whole useless managerial class and just hold on to the people who actually get shit done?
That useless managerial class actually maintains the distance between everything, between the absolute leadership and the workers. And because, like I said, there's the fear of ownership, or decision making from the top level. They literally cannot make all those decisions because there's too many fucking decisions. So you have to create this class that just manages things, and they'll do very inefficient decision making in a lot of instances. And again, I emphasize this isn't 100% universal, but it's common enough to where you notice it, and it's the dominant trend. And they just make the decisions at the last minute when they have to, and it's fine. The company doesn't care, because if the decision gets made, it doesn't matter how inefficient it was. The fact that it was made when it needed to be made is all they cared about.
It just seems.
But
absurd.
it does mean that a lot of big companies can be, and often are, lethargic. I've had encountered companies where literally this person is the number 2 of a very big company. Like, she's one step away from the CEO. She's running a segment of this organization, which is the biggest segment. It has some of the largest customers in it. It's perhaps the most important division, and she's running all elements of delivery in this, from sales all the way through the end of the customer life cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And she basically says, oh, I'm not very big on numbers. I don't know numbers. I don't do numbers.
What do you mean you don't do numbers? What the fuck is that?
Financial analysis, any type of performance metrics, any type of figures that everybody would use to know.
I understand what you mean by it, but what the fuck does she mean by saying she doesn't do numbers?
I mean, she doesn't look and understand number. If you were to give her a financial report, she couldn't do it. She couldn't follow you.
That's absurd. I mean, I'm not doubting you. Okay, let me put that right on the table, just right out of the way. I am not doubting you, but how on earth is it possible for some relatively successful executive, you say one step away from CEO, who's managing something from start to finish insofar as her company is concerned, and she doesn't do numbers? That's not a response. That's admission of defeat.
If I were to tell you that a company, I'll say this obliquely as to keep it clear that nobody knows what this company is. If I were to say that a company has values above and beyond the bottom line these days, what do you think some of those values might be?
Inclusiveness, diversity.
So diversity is a very good word you have there. If diversity is of interest to you, whom do you think might be placed in a leadership position?
Oh, I don't know. Somebody with double X chromosome, maybe?
Mm-hmm. That's one part of it. There's other elements of diversity.
Somebody who might have more melanin in their skin?
That sounds like a very compelling idea. I think, I could believe that exists. I don't know why I would believe that exists, but I guess it sometimes happens.
So you're saying that this woman, she's basically a black woman who is incompetent, and therefore she gets the big gig, and she doesn't do numbers. Oh my God.
And
That
like, and to
basically is
be
what you're
fair,
saying?
this person, I won't say this person is completely useless. This person knows how to play the politics game perfectly.
No
And
shit.
yeah.
Yeah. I
I mean,
mean,
and I don't just mean like the diversity stuff. I mean, like, knows how to interact with the leadership of the firm, make a good story as to like why we're successful, how, the firm internally, people are happy and whatnot. People get by a lot on internal politics. That really is a big deal in corporate jobs. Like, I've seen people lose jobs just because they don't get along with other people, or they just don't, it's not like they're, anybody involved is incompetent or they don't follow orders. It's just that, they don't get along in meetings. Okay, so their business career in this company is over. I've seen that happen.
well, in my own case, I've always been a self starter. I've always been a guy who's running stuff. Okay, whether it's big or small. Okay, I just do not. I cannot temperamentally have a boss. Okay, because of accidents of my personality that I understand very very clearly, but I'm powerless to change. Basically, it's because I am very competent in just about anything I set my mind to. And so the idea of handing over the reins to somebody that I perceive as less competent than myself is just something that I find intolerable. And so I don't do it. I just don't have a boss. I do it myself. And I've made out all right. Sometimes, more successes than other times. But, at the end of the day, I always feel better that if I fuck up, it was my fuck up. It wasn't somebody else's fuck up that I suffered the consequences of. You know what I mean?
Right.
So the idea of shying away from a decision, the idea of using a meeting to hide from just getting shit done, it's anathema to me. It's just something that it would never occur to me. I would, my thinking has always been, if you're going to have a meeting, it should be as quick as possible with as few people as possible, just to get something fucking done, right? Because the more people you have at a meeting, the more you have to get them all up to speed insofar as whatever's going on, right? So you want to have small meetings, and you want to be able to quickly go to the nub of the matter and have clear lines of action. I mean, my thinking is that a meeting is simply to decide who is going to do what at any given time. Because, like, you got to keep in mind, insofar as projects are concerned, I come from filmmaking, okay? Because that's when I started doing something in a corporate sense, in a sense of having multiple people working all as a team in one direction, right? And in filmmaking, everything is very clear. The whole point of a film crew is to gather a lot of people to shoot, to combine three elements: the actors, the stage, be it a location or an actual stage, and the camera. That's the whole point. And you want to have each department knowing clearly what is going on, and everybody filming and everybody on the same page, right? So any meeting you have is just to figure out why something is not happening in order to achieve the objective of filming the actors on that particular stage or location, right? And you meet to figure out what's the problem, and at that meeting you figure out the solution to the problem, or you assign the solution to a problem to somebody, and they're responsible for it. And if they don't do it, they get fired. That's one of the beauties of a film crew, is that when you work in film, very quickly the people who are capable remain, and the people who can't cut it, they quickly get ejected. Okay, it's just a part of the process of filmmaking. It's very efficient in that way. Okay, that's why it's very easy to predict how long a production is going to take, because it's almost standardized. And the people who are working on a film crew, not a student crew, I'm talking like a professional one. They are, they've gone up the ranks because it's a craft. Okay, and as you go up the ranks in your craft, people quickly figure out, oh, this guy can cut it or this guy can't, and he gets ejected. He just gets pushed aside because they don't offer him gigs. That's what happens. When other people in your milieu realize that you can't cut it, you don't get offered any more gigs, and you get pushed aside, marginalized. I'm talking like, everything from, gaffers, or gaffers are electricians, makeup artists, everybody. If you can't cut it, you don't get offered the next gig, because what happens is that if there's a new gig coming up, somebody will hear about it and he'll call up the people he knows are good, and get those people together, and they'll all go to that next shoot. And if you're bad, if you were crap in the last production, you don't go to the next level. So this culture, this corporate culture that you're describing, for me is completely alien. Okay, because it's just not something that I ever experienced, and that's why I find it fascinating.
Well, here's the reason why you don't get, even if your desire is to have those small meetings that make quick decisions. Here's why that doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in a big meeting, it's not just that you're making a decision, it's that everybody has the information they need to act upon the decision that you made. So, let's say you only needed 3 people to make that decision. Well, a dependency on your decision or an outcome of your decision is going to affect marketing. And then Susie in marketing is kind of pissed off because she heard from technical publications that they were going to do one thing, but then product marketing has a different point of view, and the decision you just made was in product according to product's point of view, which is now causing greater tension between product and technical marketing. And so we all had to have been in the same room in order to hear the decision, in order to make it. And because we were all in the same room, now we're going to have to talk and fight it out in order to make sure everybody feels comfortable. That multiplies. It doesn't go away. Everybody feels that they needed to be heard, or at least they need to get the information. Now, I will say this: people at the higher executive level, so the C-suite, those guys almost invariably know how to make decisions quickly and know what the chief information is and what isn't. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, they get to that position because they delegate, and they have to delegate the busybody work away to their underlings. And those underlings, by and large, can't make those like, I'll only make, worry about these things and not these things. They need to know about everything. They haven't taken that next learning curve. And frankly, it's this, as I said, that C-suite invariably, not always, but invariably gets you to the next level outside of the managerial class, even though technically you're still like a manager, but you become part of like an upper class, a true upper class.
Can you spot the guys who are going to wind up in the C-suite?
Yeah, you can. Some guys or gals. I've seen successful women at it. I'm not being like big. Sex is big. I legitimately have seen women who are good at it. You can spot them, but they often as not get sucked into those bigger meetings anyway, because they're the ones who are frustratingly trying to make things efficient. They'll ultimately be the decision makers, but they are going to have to put up with several years of bullshit of saying like, oh, what about this or that or the other? I mean, I've seen very sharp people get, devolve into dealing with cat fights amongst the departments because of shit like this. I've seen 2 people at a company who, they're high level, like vice president level, who can't deal with each other. They just cannot be in the same room.
Remember the novel, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Mm-hmm. And the basic premise was that the Earth was populated by these people. Remember, it was sort of like a spaceship where they put all the useless managers in one spaceship, and it was sent to colonize the Earth, and all the other spaceships were destroyed for some reason, and the only one that reached the Earth was this one populated with the managerial class, the useless managerial class that didn't know anything or do anything. Well, that novel was written in the 70s, but basically, this problem is forever. Isn't there basically a class of people who have a high IQ but no talent and no ability and no balls, and so we have to, have them spinning their wheels, and the rest of society is paying for them. Isn't that an accurate assessment?
My favorite take on that was Taleb's position, which is intellectual but dumb, or some variation. Nathan Taleb, his take in Skin in the Game. He has
Nicholas Taleb. Yeah,
Nicholas Taleb, which is basically he had the concept of intellectual but dumb, or something to that effect, or intellectual but that's very common. Like from a technical point of view, from their skill set, from their profession, they know every last thing there is to know about their expertise. But when it comes to saying, well, what does it matter? That's tough. I've seen it a lot in consulting where people are amazingly analytical and they can tell you all the complexities and the assumptions that are being made in the model that they're building, being financial or otherwise. And then as soon as you say, well, should we do X or Y? They start talking about all of the assumptions that went into it. It's like, oh, it doesn't matter. I understand assumptions went into it. Should we do X and Y? What makes more sense? That's hard for them to do. And it's related to the whole notion of skin in the game. It's like they, the only thing they're invested in is their expertise. The actual decision making, a little bit less important to them. I mean, yeah, they're incentivized to see the company do well, but I'll tell you this right now with this managerial class, if they get out of a job for whatever reason, the company goes south, they get fired, or they decide to leave, they'll get their ass into another type of company doing the same kind of shit very easily. Maybe they'll have like some down period of transitioning, but they'll get another fucking job. It's just the way it is.
And basically, I think that, yeah, there's forever going to be this class of people who are useless, but high functioning useless. Because, we look at like, I don't know, welfare queens, for example, and they're useless. We recognize that they're useless, but we're just paying them off with the dole, right? We're paying them off with welfare payments or whatever, right? The dole. What you're describing is basically the same thing, but highfalutin. Equally useless people to society that we have to pay off and put up with, and we have to find a place for them. It's kind of depressing to realize that. There was something I heard years ago that 95% of the people are useless. 1% are assholes. 1% are saints, and the 3% left over actually get shit done. I guess that's the reality of the situation, but it's a depressing reality. I mean, it's a pithy little sermon that might actually have more truth to it than not. Because the thing that I'm always surprised about is that people who actually get stuff done, people who are actually original in any given milieu or whatever, they are few and far between. I mean, like, okay, for example, in YouTube, right? I've been starting to actually like look at the people around in YouTube, the successful ones or the marginally successful. And their content is just so pedestrian. They're not pushing any kind of limit. They're not trying to do anything. They're just repeating what other people are doing. The topics are repeating what other people are doing or other people have said. And it's like a hive mind. It's so depressing and boring, And as I get older, I start to realize the similarities between stuff, because when I was young, I didn't see these similarities. I thought they were so different. But now, I see, like, for instance, like in television, all the shows are pretty much the same shit. There are a few categories, sure, here and there. But basically, everybody's copying off of everybody else. It's the same crap. Movies, the same. Everything the same. The whole culture is all the same. It's just a few discrete categories, and everything is a variation. And what's truly new, truly novel is just very rare. And often is not what's truly good, novel, is not exalted. It does not reach the highest levels. And a lot of times it's because of this mediocrity that you're talking about, because that's what you're talking about. You're describing a class of mediocrities. And it's because of these people that sometimes they get in the way, sometimes by chance and sometimes deliberately, so that the more capable do not rise. It's kind of depressing. It's very depressing, actually.
Well, yeah, but particularly for, sometimes of entertainment, you think, how do you get something to be very popular? Well, you have to realize that you have to appeal to a bell curve situation.
Yeah.
Which is the most of the population is going to be in the middle, with quickly falling tails at the high intelligence and the low intelligence side. So you're always going to appeal to that middle. Number one, because there's more people in there, and frankly, number two, because the people at the ends are still going to have a higher tolerance for the middle than the other side. You know what I mean? So that's fundamentally why a lot of things feel very similar. Why the big successful films tend to play it safe. That's why McDonald's is everybody's favorite, fast food joint. The whole spiel.
Yeah,
very common. You know what I mean? And it's funny, in business, like I said, I've encountered very stupid people, but even the people who I think are can tend to be dull. They still have enough capability to justify, like, oh, I know what I'm talking about when it's this, that, or the other. So it's funny because it's not even that bothers me the most. That's just my justification for it. The thing that bothered me the most was, frankly, their political attitudes, which is I find highly contemptible. And it isn't even just the fact that it's left wing; it's that it's fake left wingism. And I think I had mentioned before, when I was feeling red pilled, actually, this first led me to kind of think about left wing politics first. Eventually, I went back to the right. But I remembered, and I had mentioned this before, when Occupy Wall Street was doing their protests in Chicago, the liberal people, these girls from New York and whatnot, who always talk about women's liberation rights. They're literally looking down on these protesters like ants in the street and saying, why don't these people put their effort into getting an actual job? And when I heard that, I'm like, you're a fucking idiot. I mean, it's like, I hate you. I literally hate you. Like, you could not have come up with a stupider thing to have said. And I wish you would have said it outside just to see what they would do to you. And I would see it again. Like, there's a kid I know who's at my first job, my first real job. He was kind of my peer, a guy who was, I guess you'd call him my like onboarding buddy, or like the guy who, like, when I was hired, would show me the ropes and everything. He's a very politically left wing guy, but he works at the shit for like major. I'm not going to say the company's name because I don't want to put the guy on the spot, but he works for a big company that you and I have talked about doing shit that I think is just very questionable. But he's like, that's just how I make money. But I'm gonna, I'll talk about feminism and this right and people's rights here, there, and the other. And I'm like, and he and I would have these moral conversations. I said, we're full of shit on that front if you think that's acceptable to your politics. I mean, and I know everybody has to separate things out, but my God, you're taking it to such an extreme that I just think it's like it's hackneyed, and that's is the shit that bothered me.
The hypocrisy of this class,
the extreme hypocrisy of this class. This class is hypocritical like you'd never believe, more than any other class I've ever encountered.
What about ever in history, if you will?
Well, I mean, it's not like I know every single class.
No, of course. But I mean, like, okay, that's a stupid question. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase it. Do you think that this is worse than ever before in American history?
Oh, I mean, I'm sure hypocrisy on this level existed before,
in terms
for
of
sure.
Class, in terms of just the dissociation between their words and actions, because it seems that we're getting to a point that is just a little bit absurd.
Well, I'll say it this way. I think it's very unique in that it's come about at a nice apex of a lot of shitty trends that kind of coagulate. It's certainly we have my class has very neoliberal attitudes with regards to economics, but also, like migration and like, we should allow whatever people to move wherever they want because it means I have better Thai restaurants, shit like that. So you have that element. You have the left wing social justice politics in infiltrating their thinking, the idea like they take politeness and mix it into that level to kind of show off like who's the more, I hate to say this, who's the more woke person, who's the more like hip person to what matters to the other people in the society. So you have that element to it, but then they also have arch materialism getting into it, which is not just it isn't just about selfishness, but it's the whole idea that any kind of spirituality in your life is meaningless. It's all about transactions. It's all about utilitarianism at the end of the day.
It's all about measuring your personal worth by way of the objects that you possess, which is pathetic. But that seems to be the guiding mantra of this class. I mean, it's a class that I sort of belong to, or I don't know if I belong to it, but I've seen it, and yeah, they're always obsessed with the fucking car. You got the BMW, and I got the latest Mercedes, and it's just stupid. It's just a fucking car, And they don't even like the fucking car. That's the worst of it. They buy the thing as a signal to their peers, but they don't actually like it. Okay, it's just weird.
And the other thing I notice, and I'm glad my people who I work with don't know this or don't listen to this show. They love the idea of having kids, but they don't like the idea of taking care of kids. I don't know how many people in my class just go the nanny. As soon as the kid fucking plops out, it's like, nanny, you take care of it. Eventually, I'll talk to this kid when he or she's 12.
I once heard something really interesting about caring for the infirm, but it applies to children as well. That you don't you don't care for them because you love them. You love them because you care for them. The very fact of caring for a child makes you love the child more. As you care for the child, you grow into the love. It's not something that's automatically built in. It's not that you have a kid and the switch flips and you love it. No, it's the time that you spend with a kid caring for it in the quotidian sense, cleaning its diapers, making sure it doesn't fall down. If it has a little boo-boo, giving the magic cream. Basically, I lick my palms and spread the magic cream. The magic cream will make all the boo-boos go away. And you're doing that kind of quotidian task of caring for a child is what grows love within you for the child. Okay, it's not that it's just built in. And so when they outsource the care of their child, they're in a very real sense outsourcing love for that child, because they're never going to care for the child, and therefore they're never going to love it. And that
And I
seems
think
unfortunate.
it's also related to how, again, it's going to sound harsh. It's why I feel like they often produce such asshole kids,
Yeah, because
because
they know, the kids know that they're not loved. They're just paid off,
Mhm.
which is
I mean, and I'm sure, over time, it's not as if they fundamentally don't love their children or have some relationship with them, but it's a very disturbed and twisted way, because those formative years, they were distant because
yeah,
mommy and daddy were working,
yeah,
and because mommy and daddy really loved their career,
yeah. They love the career more than the kid, and the kid knows it.
which fundamentally is a selfish act.
Completely selfish. Yeah, especially on the part of the mothers.
Yeah.
Because on the part of the fathers, it's more understandable. The father's going out into the world to bring home the bacon. And that makes more sense because, we always use the expression bringing home the bacon. It used to be literally the case that the man would go out and kill the pig and bring back the bacon, literally, a hunk of flesh for the family to eat. Okay? Um, in our current society, yeah, it's more abstracted. You just go out and make the money so that you can go to the supermarket and buy the bacon. But it's the same basic process. And it seems to me that children adjust to that better. Okay. In my own case, with my own small children, they understand daddy has to go to work, but then he comes back. Okay. And then when he comes back, it's 100% attention on the kids, right? Um, but I think it's the mothers who don't, because there's a vast difference between maternal love and paternal love. There's a vast difference, and children act towards the mother and the father. It's different. It's a
Yep.
completely different experience. And the fact that the mothers are off working, it's just. I read some story years ago of some woman who left her newborn, like a month-old child, at some daycare so she could go back to work at some office job, right? And the child would cry and cry every time. And after like a month of this shit, the child stopped crying. And she was so happy. It's like, oh, the baby got used to it. But I thought to myself, no, the baby realizes that the crying is not going to help. It's pointless to cry. So the baby stopped crying, stopped caring about the mother. That's what it meant. I thought it
Right.
was horrifying, and the woman was all gleeful because now she could go to work, with a clear and clean conscience, which I found just damn, man. And I think that the neoliberal paradigm of women having to go to work, it's just destroying women's lives, and it's destroying the lives of the children that they happen to have. I think it's a fucking horrifying. And I think that historically we'll look back on this period and say, what the fuck were they thinking? Because it's all to make more GDP. It's all to make more fucking money. Keep the cost down of labor, having all these
Mhm.
women in the labor force so that cost of labor is down, so that, more is produced. For what? What's the race for? Okay? And the things that you want an improved and richer society so that you have happier, healthier children, that is precisely what is being destroyed by this paradigm. I just don't get it. I just don't understand the priorities of this contemporary society. I mean, I think we strayed
Yeah.
a bit from your original point, but
Oh, no, no, but this is the vanguard class of that group, frankly. And it kind of, unfortunately, these days it feels like their values just kind of filter their way down. And there's, like I said, fundamentally, and this is maybe, if you boiled it all down, what I worried the most about my class, there's just and I don't understand entirely why, but there's just an utter, ever present feeling of contempt they have, not just for people below them, but just frankly anybody who doesn't toe the line, anybody who questions um their value system or their career progression, anything. It's like they just unleash so much contempt. Like, I've seen people
yeah,
who, like, someone, they work in a job and then they decide, I can't do it. I need to get away from work or what have you. I've seen people, in companies just say like, that guy made a fucking stupid decision. I don't know why he would ever do that. And it's like they cut from that day forward. He always looks down on that guy
Yeah.
for making the decision to pull out of the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
The only people they admire are people with money.
yeah,
Yeah. And this notion of putting your life, the health of your life, your spiritual life ahead of your career is yeah, an anathema to them. But I also think it has to do with the fact that they're trying to self-justify their decision, because
they are.
it's a kind
Absolutely.
of suicide, the life that they're living, right?
It is. Even and I can't say that I'm, alien from it. I have seen sacrifices that I've made in terms of like working, ridiculous hours at the behest of people who really buy into this to say like, oh, nothing else matters but me closing out this little task that I need to do and like delivering this work product, on time. And I always say like, this is a group of people that if they feel like it's going to advance their career one iota, they will turn any situation into a 5 alarm fire drill that everybody else has to put out for them. I've seen it all the time, and it bothers the shit out of me to do that, because they know, and you're right, they recognize that they have the mentality that's like, okay, if it's like 10 o'clock at night, I'm going to continue to do work, or I'm going to have someone else do work on my behalf for the sake of my career. But like, fuck you and your free time and your decision to realize that there's more to life than just working. And it's a sad, empty life on their part, but they want other people to keep making that decision so that they feel that that decision was the right choice for them. And it's sick. It really is. Sorry, I feel like I'm becoming a super judgmental asshole for this, but I live with it every day.
Well, have you thought about splitting?
Oh, all the time. Every so often I do think about leaving it. And I've said this before. As soon as I hit my magic number in terms of money, I no longer need to work. I'm gone, and I am not going into even like the idea like, oh, wouldn't you be bored? That's another thing this class loves to say. Wouldn't you be bored and wouldn't want something to do, and like, wouldn't you just go back to work anyway? I'm like, no, fucking no. You'd think that work's interesting.
Yeah.
No, it's not. I have plenty of things to keep me occupied. I just tell them like, you see all the books I have, you see all the films I have. I do, and I don't tell them what exactly I do. I said I do, podcasting. I make, I have made, videos before. I've done all sorts of things. I said it's very easy for me to occupy my time. Don't worry about that, my friend.
Yeah, it seems to me that they try to self-justify their decision of what they have done, of the life that they are living, and they certainly are extremely judgmental. And in my own case, like I got a taste of that when I decided to go to Hollywood. Everybody thought that I was an idiot, and I was seeing a girl at the time who just really, she hit the roof over that. She was very corporatist. She wound up being a tenured professor at one of the top universities on the planet. In her field, and she's an expert on it. She's just a world-renowned expert on it. But it's a totally corporate career path, and just sucking up to the right people and writing the right papers and in the right way and coming to the right conclusions and just towing the party line. I knew her well enough when she was young to realize that she probably didn't come up with anything particularly novel. It was just a regurgitation of what other people had said, and that advanced her career because that was her mentality, that she wanted an academic career, and she wanted a tenured professorship, but she wasn't really an original person. She didn't look at things in any kind of original way. She didn't have any kind of original point of view about things. And it was really interesting. She sort of like, and because I knew her when she was in college, she sort of like tried to smooth away any kind of originality. And that I couldn't quite understand, because sometimes because she was learning stuff, she would have unformed opinions that were contrary to the norm. But she would quickly abandon them and latch on to the accepted point of view. Whereas my approach was always the opposite. Oh, that's the accepted point of view? Cool. What about if we go right over there, 180 degrees in the opposite direction? What will we find there? That's always been my approach, because it's just my mentality. It's just the way I am. Because I'm rather relatively bored by what's already been achieved, or a path already taken. I'm interested in the things that nobody knows about or nobody's thought about, or no path, or a path that nobody's taken before, right? But she would shy away from that deliberately. She would always latch on to the accepted opinion, and she was
And
furious.
that's common
Yeah,
for that. That's very common for that class because that's the fundamental risk-averse nature
yeah,
that we have. It's all. I mean, the whole notion of a salaried career like that, high paid. Hey, it's a known quantity income. I can bank on it, and I'll be, I can find my little niche and ride it to retirement, kind of thing. When you do something creative and or starting your own business or doing anything like that, you're taking a risk. You're taking a risk to do that.
yeah,
There's a risk reward trade off that you could earn really big and really engage, find the freedom that you ultimately wanted, but the downside risk of if it fails, like that, they're too frightened of it, and so they avoid it, like the plague, literally like the plague. So I think that's breeding some resentment as well in the group of people I'm dealing with, and I think I've told you elsewhere that I may have said it on the podcast that like I don't really like inviting people in my class over for like dinner parties or any kind of thing. I don't hang out with them as much as I mean, just the bare minimum.
yeah.
Not just, like I said, it's not about like every last person in the class is an asshole. I mean, that's just inherently not true.
No,
But it's
obviously
like,
not.
with any kind of statistical group, there's a mean average that you can predict what people are going to behave like.
Sure. So why don't
And
you
it's the same
invite
thing.
them? Why don't you invite them?
I know what the conversation will be before it happens.
Hmm.
And I know what they will spend their time on, and I know there will be a long time of bitch sessioning, and I know there will be some moaning about how people don't have the exact same attitudes that we do. There'll be a discussion of like how, oh, what path did you drive to get here? How efficient was it? What are you thinking about buying? Hey, I'm gonna put some kind of new design or I'm gonna have just like a new aluminum siding on my house, or this whatever the new design thing is. And they want, they'll talk about that. And and I know when I talk to them, I can never talk freely to them. I can never, if I were to just speak crudely, like a working class person would, the kind of people I grew up with, that would just be disgusting to them. I'll give you another example, and I think this came in college. I remember, there was something that happened in college. Someone drew a swastika somewhere, and the whole fucking community freaked the fuck out. It was like, oh my god, this means that someone's going to stalk all the Jews at night and kill them in their bed, and then drink their blood, and then how will we mitzvah after that? Exactly. And then I said at the time, I said, look, kids in my high school would draw swastikas in the bathroom all the time because it was just some stupid shit to do. It would annoy people. It doesn't really mean anything. I don't think you have anything to worry about. And they looked at me like I was the sick person. Like, they said, what kind of nasty school did you go to? I'm like, it was a public school, you dumb fuck. It was actually a high quality suburban public school. It was good enough for me to get into here with the rest of you dipshits. Attitude. And at that point I knew, okay, I cannot speak freely to them. Also, I called one of my classmates a cunt the first day of orientation week, so that probably helped too.
No, no. Look, I think that I think that this class is the problem is that this class has become entrenched, and I think it's suffocating the society because they so want stability, and they are enough people that they have imposed a stability that I think that this stability is killing the country. Frankly, we need a crisis. I know everybody on the right has said that, oh, these fucking Democrats are praying for a recession, right? I'm not praying for a recession. I'm praying for an out and out economic cataclysm, economic, social, everything. Just stir the pot up, pick up all the pieces and toss them in the air, that kind of situation. Because I think that kind of chaos is much better than the stasis we are currently experiencing. I'm going to be doing a post called, Chaos is Better Than Stasis, because I think that in the long run, stasis just leads to death. Chaos,
Yep.
you're alive. And what you're talking about in this particular class, they seem soul dead. You know what I mean?
I'm going to call you Coach Accelerationist Pill now, because
Yeah.
that's pretty much accelerationist argument, and I think I'm along the same lines, which is to say, look, if you keep maintaining this status quo, the ultimate collapse is going to be worse than you could ever possibly dream of.
Yeah.
Let's get it over with sooner.
Yes.
Let's accelerate the process. Because frankly, if my class, my type of people, with the way we're thinking, with all of our, especially my generation's particular take on politics, if you leave us in charge for any longer and fucking Ocasio-Cortez, I will get it right once. If she's my generation, she's just a few years younger than me. If that's our future and that's what we're going to look like when we're in charge,
we're fucked.
God help you. God help you if we last for another 20 years in that position. It will be worse than it is now, and now is not very good to begin with. Get it over with now.
Yes. And on that cheerful note, of hoping for, death, destruction, and destiny, we'll bid you a fond farewell. This has been the Coach and Benway podcast, and I am Coach Red Pill, and so long, and Dr. Benway, why don't you take us out?
If you need consulting services, please visit my website.
Okay, so he's shilling for his consulting services. That's what Dr. Benway, that's why Dr. Benway is doing this podcast. He wants to be your consultant, your life consultant, to consult with on everything, including what time you take a shit and take a piss. So, on that cheerful note, we'll call it a podcast. So long. Thank you very much.
Hey, take care, everyone.